So Bob, as I listened, interesting, the social contract piece is really built right into your mandate. And then obviously that's set by government and the electorate. But the other piece is the balancing with the taxpayers that you need to do. And that's the interesting part, and interesting to compare your stories and what happened in the US. And it would be interesting to see where were the boards, understanding the conflict and issues and the risks that could arise through that. Let me ask the group just around that. Clearly, if you're in the public sector, dealing with a government is a key stakeholder, typically for most organizations. Your thoughts around, you know, government and rules and regulations, it tends to get pushed down into the organization, the bowels, and we'll work through compliance. But the question is for boards, given the shift of governments, more regulations, should that be pushed up higher in terms of engagement, proactively shaping things, and what should boards essentially be doing around that area?
Well, again, I'm going to show up as being too cynical here, but my view of governments over the last decade or so is that they have left the field to some extent and are governing a little bit more by poll than they might be by policy. So I think it's absolutely incumbent upon boards of directors to be in front of governments all the time and putting themselves in the shoes of government with respect to issues of great concern. You have to think about it from a government perspective, which, as we know, is always, do I get reelected or not? And I think boards spend a reasonable amount of time on it, but not enough time in really understanding where the next issue is going to come from. I made the point earlier about tax fairness, for example, and that's something that obviously is both an issue to governments from a policy perspective, but even more importantly, it's of interest from a poll perspective. So you have to put yourself in the position, and while your tax position is managed by a VP of taxation, it really has started to become more of a board issue in what is the right amount of tax that I should pay in order to make sure that the government doesn't get on my back.
Any other thoughts on that, the importance of elevating that issue up to the board level?
Well, I was going to comment just on a point that Alan made, and it's really, how has the role of government shifted, has also promoted why are NGOs paying so much attention to corporations and as an ability of affecting and moving change. That's when we've now seen groups like World Wildlife Fund or Greenpeace or others actually work in a collaborative way with industry to achieve an issue or to progress an issue where they're not necessarily having that much success working with government. So I just wanted to build on what Alan was saying, because in fact that's actually stemming an increased interest from an NGO community.
So one last question for the panel before I go back to our audience to get them working, but it's around this measurement aspect, and we can do great cash flow models, discounted cash flow, et cetera, on the financial side. We're challenged on the other side of environmental and social factors. So, and Wendy, you talked a bit about ROI, that's important, and I think most organizations say if there's going to be an opportunity, whatnot, we need to understand it better. We need to see a business case, which requires some analysis. So thoughts about how boards should be pushing beyond, what I might call field of dreams. What should they be looking at? What should they be pushing on this? Understand ROI, some key measures they should be looking at.
Yeah, I think dealing with an ROI in this whole area is challenging in some areas, and it lends itself, for example, environmental sustainability as a strategy lends itself more easily to being measurable. Boards do have to say, let's take a reality check, because if management is advocating a program that you're going to sink millions of dollars into, and there's no potential return, other than a lack of downside, then I think they have to ask those questions and request that as many of those issues as possible be quantified, and what those returns can be. And as I say, it's easier to measure in some areas than others. The environmental one becomes an obvious one. you reduce your costs of electricity, or you're increasing efficiencies, and there's a definite bottom line. In other areas, not so easy.
Any other thoughts on how we get some handle around this? Bob, you must have to deal with that in some shape or fashion in terms of what are the costs and what's the payback?
Yeah, it's I would say it's virtually impossible to measure, and it's kind of embedded in the overall return on equity and long-term shareholder value creation that you create. And to some degree, it's a way of mitigating risk too, so that you can produce higher returns with less risk over time. And there's no easy way to calculate that. There's no formula to that. But I've always had a CSR committee at the board level. I think boards are interested and engaged in that because customers are interested in it and employees are interested in it, quite frankly, as well. And the two ones that, as a banker, I always focused on was energy efficiency. And you're going to get what you measure. So what are the efficiency measures, energy efficiency measures you're going to look at, and what are the goals you're going to have, and how do you look vis-a-vis your peers? And are you actually making progress? And you want to report that to your customers as well as your employees to show that you're paying attention to that. And also the other broad environmental impact of the fact that banks print a lot of paper and fell a lot of trees. So over time, if you can really reduce the usage of paper, for example, that's much better for our forests. And we really measure that too. We put programs in place to allow over time all of our customers just to try to deal with us electronically. It's better for the shareholders and it's better for the environment.
Don, can I add to that? But I do think there's progress being made to try to quantify the impact. So whether it be shared value assessments that are looking at quantification, assessments around impact and measurable impact in terms of the good that this might do. Two projects that I'm aware of that we were involved with was one which was, again, back in the tourism sector. They're looking at the investment and looking at the ROI around an investment to bring in youth at risk in an area in one of the Caribbean islands in Kingston, Jamaica, where it was actually quite a dangerous part to be in. So the premise is we're going to bring in youth at risk. We're going to involve them. They're going to be engaged in the community, in the hotel. Does that actually reduce, in fact, the amount of vandalism? Does it reduce the amount of security guards that we need to put into place around that hotel? Can we factor in the ROI? And that's what they're measuring. That's what they're going about measuring. The timeline to measuring, which is why monitoring and reporting is very important, will not be immediate. It'll be a 1 or 2 year scenario in terms of looking at that. But ultimately, their premise is that there will definitely be a return on investment because they're currently paying an awful lot on security guards and dealing with vandalism. But engaging the community that's perhaps causing that and giving them something meaningful to do should, in fact, have an ROI. So I do think that there's more and more interest in looking at can we allocate that investment in those dollars in the right ways so that ultimately there is a shared value and benefit.
So certainly a lot of challenges, but I think a bit of stay tuned because nothing like human ingenuity to work and find solutions around these things. Okay, out to the audience. Here we have another discussion question. What are the key actions a board needs to take to ensure a social license strategy is embedded in the organization? We'll see you in 7 minutes.